Hello all, my name is Michael Blake, and this is my disease presentation discussing the bubonic plague, what it is, what it was, and how it came about. Before we begin, I'd like to give a brief overview on my topic. The bubonic plague, also referred to as the Black Death, was a highly fatal disease that took its toll on 14th century Europe. Upon contraction of the bubonic plague, its recipients would experience chills, fever, headache, serious muscle fatigue, weakness, but most notably, swelling and pain in lymph nodes. This swelling would cause what is referred to as buboes, which were unique to this sickness. These buboes became a dark color, and along with the high mortality rate, gave this disease its Black Death naming convention. At its height, it is estimated that the mortality rate was between 30 to 60%, but modern medicine advances like antibiotics have decreased this statistic significantly. It is important to point out that this disease was a pandemic, but is no longer considered as such. Alright, so moving on, I'll be covering the origin of the bubonic plague as well as how it was transmitted. While its exact origin is uncertain, it is alleged to have originated in Asia, or more specifically China. It is important for me to point out that the 14th century saw a quick rise in popularity of the Silk Road in China. The Silk Road connected China to other Western trade routes, which later led to the Mediterranean, and this is where boats would leave and travel to other countries. Early or first reportings were in Europe during mid-14th century. The actual bacterium that causes the sickness has the name Yersinia pestis. Fleas that were carrying the Yersinia pestis would infect rodents, and those rodents that made their way to Europe aboard merchant ships then made their way to biting humans. If you take a look at my transmission list as well as its vectors, you can see that it started in some sort of reservoir where the Yersinia pestis was able to form. Then it was passed to fleas, who then passed it to rodents, who then passed it to humans. Okay, now I'm going to share the societal impact that the bubonic plague had on mid-century Europe. It was significant. I can tell you that with confidence. This was an awful time period which brought widespread panic and death to Europe. It is in fact the most fatal pandemic in recorded history, killing an estimated 25 million people in Europe, or about a third of its population at the time. As you could imagine, this directly impacted the workforce and middle class, resulting in a shortage of labor. In a weird way, this caused higher wages for those who were able to work and improved their working conditions. However, the widespread hysteria also affected the religious views of many Europeans, causing people to seek some sort of explanation for the atrocities. People also sought comfort from religious leaders in search of some sort of answer. Alright, now I'll be moving on to its economic impact, and as mentioned before, widespread death and social disruption led to a shortage of labor. As a result, the significance of the middle class was reasserted and saw the rise of skilled craftsmen and merchants. There was a sort of shift in power between lords and their serfs. Due to a shortage of workers, lords were essentially forced to offer better working conditions in order to retain the skills of their workers. And its cultural impact was substantial as well. The bubonic plague had a lasting impact on art and literature, as writers and artists alike found themselves regularly discussing death and the negative feelings that came with it. There was this sort of change in attitude surrounding death. People became more aware that, and excuse me for not having a better way to describe this, but people became aware that death was coming. And as a result, a rise in the use of memorial art came about, like gravestones. Now, very quickly, divine justice is essentially the will of God and what is due. This caused many Europeans to believe that God had doomed them and caused others to question and challenge these long-held beliefs. And finally, I have for you the bubonic plague and its present-day presence. It does still in fact exist, and it is still carried and transmitted through the means discussed earlier. It can be fatal if not treated properly. Outbreaks do still occur, but are isolated immediately and dealt with accordingly. It is advised to seek immediate medical attention if you develop its unique buboes. I would also like to point out that the proper antibiotics are highly effective at reducing mortality when taken at the appropriate and early time. Thank you for your time.